Hi everyone, Crista Cowan here with another episode of The Barefoot Genealogist. Today's topic is AncestryDNA, and there's a lot to cover, and so right up front, let me just tell you what we are going to cover and what we're not going to cover so that you're really clear about what this video entails. I did a video several months ago about DNA ethnicity, and also a little bit of information in there about the science behind how DNA is passed down. So we're not going to talk about that today. If you have not viewed that previous video, you can find it on our YouTube channel. When we archive this, I'll make sure a link gets put in the comments just below the video so that you can link directly to that video. So that's not what we're going to talk about today. What we are going to talk about today is cousin matches. So if you've taken the AncestryDNA test, you know that you get all of these matches of people who share DNA with you. And several of you have expressed some frustration or some confusion about what to do with all of those DNA matches. And so that's very specifically what we're going to talk about today. Now, even with that specific of a focus, we still have a lot to cover. And so I've broken today's presentation into two really distinct parts. Our show is usually about 20 minutes long, and I have a feeling today we're probably going to run about 40 minutes. So for the first 20 minutes, if that's all you have time to spend with us, we're going to talk specifically about what these cousin matches are, what they mean, and what tools are available to you to help review and analyze them. Then in the second 20-minute segment, if you can stick around for that, or if you can watch it later on replay, I'll show you exactly how I use the program, how I have searched my cousin matches to find the common ancestor, what kinds of tips and tricks that I've picked up along the way that might help you. So again, that's going to be two 20-minute segments today. If you can only stick around for the first 20 minutes, that's fine. We will have both as two separate videos, hopefully, on our YouTube channel when we archive this later today or tomorrow. So with that much of an introduction, let's go ahead and dive in. Lots to cover today. Let's start by talking about just some basic information about why we provide these cousin matches. We've had some people question what the purpose of them is. A lot of people take the DNA test with various expectations. Some people take the DNA test simply to get the ethnicity information, but the real power behind AncestryDNA, the real value is these matches that connect you to other people that you are related to. And some of you, that may not be that exciting, but for me, and hopefully I can impart some of this, I find this really exciting, that we can find other people that we are certainly related to, and that we can then work with them to further grow our family tree. Now, of course, the goal and the challenge that we have is figuring out exactly how we are related to those cousin matches. Sometimes it's really easy and it's really obvious. Sometimes it's not so obvious and it takes a little bit of effort. Sometimes it's really not obvious and it takes a lot of effort. And those are kind of the three tiers of how I approach this. Low-hanging fruit, and then you kind of work your way through the more complicated matches. But it's kind of like a mystery. I feel a little bit like a detective sometimes as I try to solve some of these problems and make some of these connections. It's like the world's greatest puzzle, and it's exciting to be able to wrap my head around it and to dig into one of these problems, and it's even more exciting when I actually solve it. So that's the goal. Excuse me. So the question has been asked, how is this any different than just the regular shaky leaf tree matches that we get when we have our tree online or in Family Tree Maker? And here's the answer that I received from our DNA team, and I loved it so much I just wrote it down word for word. They said DNA matches are hints that are backed up by the science. So if you have somebody in that list of cousins, we know that you share DNA with that person. That's scientific. Now, what DNA you share with them, how much DNA you share with them, and where you connect on your tree, of course, then is the challenge or the puzzle that we're trying to solve. So I feel like they're a lot more valuable than the regular tree matches. because I know I'm related to this person. And I've already started connecting with several of these people, and we've been able to prove out more fully information on our family tree. I inherited a lot of my genealogy from parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles, and haven't gone through my whole tree yet to document every piece of information. And so it's been exciting for me to see matches coming up through distant relatives, and I'm talking about ancestors who lived in the 16 and 1700s even, and to know that that gives more credence to that connection, that I'm really climbing up the right branches, that I'm not fabricating my family tree, and that it's not just just something that clicked and matched, that it's actually backed up by the science. So let's talk a little bit then about just what experience people are having, so that you can kind of gauge where you're at on this scale. On average, we've discovered that AncestryDNA participants have about 20 fourth cousin matches. And that is up from about 12 6 months ago. 6 months ago, I attended a conference where I listened to one of the DNA product managers talk about how the average DNA participant had 12 fourth cousin matches. And now 6 months later, we're up to 20. And as more and more people take the DNA test, that number will only increase. You'll have more and more possibilities, more and more cousins to connect to. Not only that, most active customers have found on average about 40 shared relatives. So you've got your 24th cousins, and that means that 20 more of these are in your distant cousins, that 5th to 6th cousin range. And if you haven't looked at that, I'll show you that in just a minute. So let me just give you my experience. I have 1 third cousin match, and I have 17 fourth cousin matches, so that's 18. And so that makes me a little bit below average. However, one of the things that I've discovered is that in those distant cousin matches, I have actually identified 1 more third cousin and 2 more fourth cousins that the way that the DNA was handed down to each of us, it made it look like we were not as related. And so they showed up in my distant cousin matches, one of them even with very low confidence. And it turns out that I had 1 third cousin and 2 fourth cousins buried in those distant cousin matches that I was able to pluck out. So now I'm up to 21 either third or fourth cousin matches. And that's really exciting for me. Lots of really great things that we've been able to share, and some connections that have been made, and so those closer connections are exciting. But the distant connections still have some value as well. Those other 20 people that most active customers find have helped them grow their tree. And what we're discovering is that they're finding 1 new common ancestor a week. And that's huge. I have new matches showing up every single day, and that's more people to help and more people to discover. Now, let's talk about cousins for just a minute. I'm so sorry about this cold of mine. I just didn't want to delay this presentation. So let's talk about cousins for just a minute. Sometimes people don't quite understand the math of it all, or they don't quite understand what cousin relationships mean or how they connect. So if you were around several months ago, you may remember that I created a chart called What's Your Number? It was actually in the first DNA presentation that I did, where we just started to wrap our heads around the idea about how many possible ancestors we have and how many of those we've actually identified. So I reworked that chart just a little bit, and now we're looking at it from this perspective of common ancestors. So let's start with the low numbers, because those are easier to understand, at least for me. If you have a first cousin, that means you have a common grandparent, and you have 4 grandparents. That's how you read this chart. So if somebody shows up as a first cousin match, and I don't have any of those yet, you have 4 possible grandparents that you can connect on. Now, I know all of my first cousins. I know every one of them personally. I know all of my second cousins, and if I haven't met them, I at least know of them, or I'm friends with them on Facebook. So those people I'm pretty confident about. But when we start hitting this third cousin level, that's where I start, at least in my family, I start losing people. My grandmother's first cousins have had children and grandchildren. Those grandchildren would be my third cousins, and I don't know all of them. I don't even know about all of them. But what that means is that we have a common great-great-grandparents, and there are 16 of those. Now, I personally know all 16 of my great-great-grandparents. I've got, I don't personally know them. I've got documentation about them. I have them entered in my family tree. I have information about them. Now, in the very next generation, and this is where you're going to find that about 20, on average 20 fourth cousins, if you remember. If you're a fourth cousin, it means you have a common third great-grandparent, so great-great-great-grandparent. You have 32 of those. Now, I don't know what your tree looks like, but I only know 30 of my 32 third great-grandparents. So what that means is that if I can't figure out how they connect to me, it could be that couple that I'm missing is the connection. Or it could be that they don't know, that my match doesn't know all 32 of their third great-grandparents. And so maybe I can work with them to help them identify more of their third great-grandparents so that we can make that connection. Okay, and then that's where I'm going to stop with this example because that's the easy math. After that, it starts getting a little more complicated. It is certainly not impossible, but it does get a little bit more complicated. And so get your head wrapped around this fourth cousin level, and then maybe you can move on a little bit further once you've figured that out. So that's just how cousins work and how common ancestors work, and hopefully that helps give you an idea of the scope of things that we're dealing with when we start talking about these 5th through 8th cousins, right? We're talking 1,000 people here that we have to connect on, that we have the possibility of connecting on. Now, let's just talk about some basic steps to success with your DNA matches. There are some things that will help you be more successful in identifying the common ancestors. There are some things that will help you be more successful in connecting with other people. And there are some things that will help us as a community be more successful as we start to share and dig into and figure out these common ancestors. So the first piece of advice is make sure you have a tree. Make sure you have an online family tree. If you do not have a family tree online, you you're going to have to do all the work yourself. If you have your tree online, then anybody who shows you as a match can look at that tree and they can work with you to figure out the common ancestor. If you do not have your tree online, you're going to have to do all that work. So make sure you've got a tree online. Then make sure that you've attached your DNA results to the appropriate person in your family tree. Here's why this is important, right? So both of my parents are still living. And so I made the decision to have each of my parents tested rather than to take the test myself. And I did that because I wanted to be able to separate the DNA results. I wanted to be able to look at a match and know whether it came from my father's side of the family or my mother's side of the family. And so having each of them take the test, because they're both still living, made the most sense. Now, I have one grandparent still living, and I'm probably going to have her take the test as well. Because that will help me further identify the split in my father's DNA. The matches that she has in common with my father will probably be on her line, and if there are matches that are on his list that don't show up on her list, then they likely come from his father's side of the family. So there's some things you can do there, but make sure you attach your results to the appropriate person in your family tree. I did not attach them to myself because I'm not the one who took the test. Don't attach them to the home person, if it's not the person that took the test. So that's really, really critical. Also, and I can't emphasize this enough, become very familiar with your own family tree. Now, that may seem like a really silly thing, but as I started digging into my own matches, one of the things that I discovered was that I had 6th, 7th, 8th great-grandparents whose names I would not have recognized if you had dropped them in my lap. As a matter of fact, some of them were dropped in my lap as matches, and I breezed right over them because I didn't know that they were my ancestor. And it's because, again, in my case anyway, I inherited a lot of my family history from from parents and aunts and uncles who had done a lot of genealogy research over the last 50 years, and I had not paid attention to some of those branches of the family tree. And so what I did was I just printed out a surname list by generation, and I did that straight out of my Family Tree Maker program, where I could just say, you know what, show me, this particular, I want to see all of my third great-grandparents, or all of my fourth great-grandparents, all of my fifth great-grandparents, and then I just exported that into a surname list so that I could start to become more familiar with those surnames. At one point, I even printed it out on a long strip of paper and tacked it up on my desk so that I could see it. That was a very long strip of paper, however, and it started getting in my way, so we've moved it since then. But just become very familiar with your own family tree so that when you do come across some of these matches, you start to recognize them. And then the third piece of advice I have for you is just have a system for reviewing and analyzing your matches. One of the challenges with family history, and I'm sure many of you can identify with this, is that we often are distracted. I get called down rabbit holes by various cousins and aunts and uncles and their descendants. And, all of a sudden I started working on one thing and I'm 3 generations and 4 states away an hour later trying to figure out what just happened. So it's really easy in family history and genealogy research to get distracted or to become quickly disorganized. And so have a system for reviewing and analyzing those matches. I'll show you in the second 20-minute segment today, I'll show you my own system. It's not by any stretch of the imagination the definitive system, but hopefully it'll give you some ideas or spark some thoughts for you that can help you create your own system so that you can figure out how to do that. Now, we have provided you with a lot of tools to do this. And so let's just, in the last few minutes of this first segment here, let's just review the tools that are available for you to review and analyze your DNA matches. So here are my father's DNA results. You can see that the ethnicity section is here at the top, and I wasn't really excited about that. I didn't care one way or the other. I was more excited about these cousin matches, and so that's the meat of it for me in particular. And it's just this giant list, right? So I have this whole list of matches, and usually I think the default here is all, and it sorts by relationship, and it shows you the full relationship range. And so you can see there my 1/3 cousin, and there are my 17 fourth cousin matches. And then we get into these distant cousin matches that are 5th to 8th cousins, and varying degrees of confidence about that relationship. And as you scroll down further through this list, you're going to discover, I think, that I have 38 pages of those. And it's really easy to get very quickly overwhelmed with that. And I don't want you to be overwhelmed. There's some things we can do here to just really be systematic about this. So the first tool that Ancestry.com has provided for you, and this is fairly new and for me super exciting, is under the filters, we now have an option for has a hint. And what you may notice, or may have already noticed, is that on some of your matches, you have a little shaky leaf, right? Just like you do in your tree when you're digging into your online tree. What that means is that Ancestry.com has discovered that you have a DNA match with this person. And then we have also compared your 2 trees online and been able to figure out exactly who your common ancestor is. So if I click here on this match, it's going to take me to a chart here that is going to show me exactly how this other user and my father are related. And in this case, it's not even just a 3rd cousin. He is a 2nd cousin to my grandmother. So he's a 2nd cousin once removed. That's really exciting. That's what we call low-hanging fruit, when you can see exactly how you're related. Not only that, we've all got pictures in here, and I mean, this is a pretty family tree. Now, here's the thing about this particular match, though. In my case, I didn't know who he was. I had no clue. I had no clue who his mother was, even though she and my great-grandmother are first cousins. I knew about his grandmother, but we had somehow lost that thread of the family after that. So it's really great for making some of those connections or remaking some of those connections. Now, because this is such a close connection, again, even an exciting thing about this is that means that all of our ancestors beyond that are shared ancestors. So starting right here in his tree, all of these people that he has are also my ancestors. And so I can review his tree, see what research he has done that I can that I can have him share with me, so that I can continue to grow my family tree, see what holes I have or what things I'm missing. That's really exciting. So again, you're going to find that by filtering here into has a hint, and you'll be able to then go through and review each one of these matches to see what exactly how you're related. Now, there are some other options here. The other one that I use the most often is this not viewed. I have a brand new fourth cousin. This guy just showed up this morning. I haven't even had a chance to look at it yet. And so I can go through these. Now, you'll notice here, we have now added when they last logged in. So this guy last logged in last week. Looks like this guy last logged in a couple of days ago. If it doesn't say anything, either they haven't logged in a while, or we haven't been able to tell when they last logged in. So that can give you an idea. And one of the things we discovered is that anybody who's taken the DNA test is much more active. Of course, this is mostly because we only made the test available to subscribers for the first long while, and have only just recently opened it up to non-subscribers, but a lot more active people. The other thing you're going to notice here is that we'll tell you if they have a tree, how many people are in that tree. Now, we'll talk in the second segment here in just a few minutes about how that number doesn't really matter, or in some cases it doesn't matter, but it gives you an idea of what you're getting into. If there's a little lock attached, it means that that person has a private tree. Now, I get just as frustrated as some of you get with private trees, but my tree was private until just very recently. I had people contacting me almost daily saying, hey, we're a DNA match, will you share your tree? Hey, you're a DNA match, will you share your tree? And I finally just made the decision to go ahead and make my tree public. My tree was private simply because I have a reputation as a genealogist to protect, and because I have inherited a lot of my family history and not vetted much of it. I didn't want to make it public with all its mistakes and whatnot, but I just decided, you know what, this is more important. And so I went ahead and made my tree public, and have actually had some even better communication now with some users. So if somebody's tree is private, don't just dismiss it out of hand. Go ahead and send them a message. You can do that when you're reviewing their match. There is an option here to send them a message. Be nice. We have received reports of people saying that private tree owners are getting some not so nice messages. So I would encourage you to be nice. Ask them if they can see your tree, if they can figure out or share how you're related. Let them know that you're willing to help. Figure out the shared connection if they are willing to invite you as a guest to their tree. And maybe even share a few of your surnames with them so that they can feel a little bit more comfortable having that, giving you that kind of access. Everybody has their own reasons for keeping their trees private. And so don't assume that you know what those reasons are, or that they're not willing to share, because many, many, many of them are more than willing to share their tree or to work with you to figure those things out. You can also add a note here, and we've enabled that on everything, where you can just make a note to yourself that you sent them a message. Once you send them a message, it will actually say here that you've communicated with them, so that you know that there are messages, but you do have the opportunity to do that as well. Now I'm going to go ahead and mark this as not viewed because I didn't actually do anything with it yet, and I don't want to lose it off my list, which is another thing you can do. One of the final features on here, well, there's two more that I just want to share with you, and then we'll dive into the second segment where I'll actually walk you through how I have done some of these things for myself. The other filter that I use quite a bit is this starred feature. So what you'll discover is that as I have gone through and either made notes on people, which I can hover over and see, or if I've discovered what the connection is, I can see, I've gone ahead and starred that so that I can see what that connection is. And then it brings up this whole list here of people that I've starred. So for me, those are people either that I know I've got a connection with, or people that I'm fairly certain I know what the connection is, so that I can go back and do some further research. The final thing here I want to show you, the final tool that we've provided you with, has to do with this date sort. So I just have started using this, and basically what it is it's you can sort all of your results by how recent they are. And as this program grows and as people start to have more and more results, this may be a really quick, easy way for you, a systematic way for you to work through those. If you haven't gotten to some that are 3 or 4 or 5 months old, maybe you want to start with some of the more recent matches. Like I said, these are my matches just in the last week. This one is brand new today, and it's a fourth cousin. As a matter of fact, if I scroll down this list, I will show you right, oh wow, here, so that far down my list, everything above that is new as of yesterday. So lots and lots and lots of new stuff coming online every single day. Lots of new people taking this test every single day. So if you don't yet have your 20 fourth cousin matches, rest assured that as more and more people take this test, that will happen. So that is the end of part 1 of our presentation today. If you've been with us before, you know that these presentations are typically 20 to 25 minutes long. We've run 27 minutes now in segment 1, and I knew that we had a lot to cover today and that this was a very hot topic, a very a very current and a very relevant topic for many of you. And so I wanted to make sure that I provided you with as much information as possible. So if you can stick around with us for the next 20 minutes, I will be sharing with you just some tips and tricks for how I've done it, the system that I'm using to manage my DNA matches, and some of the communications and some of the successes that I've had. So welcome to part 2 of AncestryDNA, what to do with all of those matches. If you have not yet watched part 1, if you're watching an archived version of this video, please do so. The link is just below the video. On YouTube, we'll put it in the description for the video so that you can watch part 1. Here's what we're going to be talking about in part 2, just a little bit about how I do my DNA matches, the system that I've come up with, or the system that I've discovered that works best for me to keep track of things. Now, what you're looking at here on your screen is actually my desk here in the office, and you can see that one of the things that I have done that has saved my life more than anything is to have dual screens. It's not a terribly expensive setup. You can get an additional computer screen to hook up and a video card for fairly inexpensively. So if you have the means to do so, I would strongly encourage that you do this. As you can see, I keep my Family Tree Maker program open in one window and Ancestry.com open in the other window. And then I can just mouse back and forth between the two windows. If you don't have Family Tree Maker, you can actually open up another web browser and have your online family tree here and the record search or the DNA matches or whatever on this side. So this is one of the things that I have done that has helped me more than just about anything else. Now, we talked in the last segment about tools that are available to help you analyze and review The first, of course, being those shaky leaf hints. Just a quick review of those shaky leaf hints. You're going to find that under the filter. You're going to select has a hint, and you'll see these little leaves pop up. And when I click through to any one of those, it will tell me exactly how I am related to that person. Now, when I click through to review that, it'll bring up a little chart that shows me who our common ancestor is. In this case, it's a set of seventh great grandparents. This person who took the test is a seventh cousin once removed to my father, which makes him a seventh cousin to my grandfather. And that's a really clear, great picture of exactly how we're related. You can see here we descend from two different daughters of this couple. Now, one of the reasons that's exciting for me is because it helps me to validate that I've been climbing up the correct family tree. As we start getting back into the early 1800s and the 1700s, even back into the 1600s on some of these family trees, this information becomes more and more difficult to obtain. It also sometimes becomes a little bit more convoluted. There's sometimes more confusion. The names sometimes are way more common. I find as I go back further in my family tree, I have a lot more common names. Samuel Andrews, very common. Do I have the right Samuel Andrews? So DNA helps me to have confidence that I've been chasing up the correct family trees. It also allows me to connect with some of these cousins. So as I look at my results, I showed you earlier in segment 1 a result with a gentleman who is a second cousin to my grandmother. And one of the reasons that was so important to me, let me change the filter view of this here. One of the reasons that was so important to me was because this gentleman had actually been to the village in Germany where our common ancestor was from. He had visited the church where for generations before that, our common ancestors were christened and where they were married and where they were buried, and he had taken some pictures and he shared those pictures with me. They were pictures that he had not uploaded to his family tree. They were pictures that he just had in his private collection, mostly because he was in several of those pictures of himself standing in front of the church or in the cemetery, and he shared those pictures with me. And I think that that's just a great treasure that I can now see some of the same things that my ancestors saw. All because I've made this connection with this gentleman. He and I are now Facebook friends, and hopefully as soon as I come out of my DNA results, I've spent a lot of time with them, he and I will have an opportunity to maybe share some more information about our common ancestry. So that's one of the reasons those shaky leaf hints are so great, and one of the things that I do with them. And even if I can see how they're related, I still contact these people. I still want to let them know, hey, just because I can see that we're related, I want to make a connection. And so I still send them a message and let them know that I've reviewed the results and that this is how I've read those results, and I have some stuff to share, and is there anything you'd like to share? And those communications can sometimes turn into not just great research collaboration partners, but you can make lifelong friends with some of these cousins. Now, for those connections where it's not really clear how you're related, where we can't specifically match up on your tree exactly what's going on, you have to get a little bit more creative. And so we have provided you with some tools to do that. I'm looking for a specific match on this list here. I probably should have starred it so that I could have found it quickly. I have all these new matches today. Oh, I know why, because I'm looking at the wrong view. Sort by date. And once we sort by date, we'll see all of my new matches from the last week. That's what it sorts on the top, is matches from the last 7 days. And then we can go ahead and view one of these new matches that I just discovered yesterday here. So this person, CJ Chauncey, I have no idea who she is. She last logged in today. That's exciting for me. Now, the system could not figure out how we were related. And so one of the tools that we provide you is these shared surnames, right? And here's the caution and the tip that I want to give you about these shared surnames. This is just a jump start, right? This does not mean you are connected through one of these surnames. It just means, hey, here's some of the surnames that match in your family tree. Why don't you look at that and see if maybe that's how you're related? And so you can click on any one of those and it will bring up, you know what, here's the person in their tree and here's the person in your tree. And so I can look at this and I can say, well, my person was born in England and their person was born in Massachusetts. So probably not an immediate connection there. And you can go through those that way and make a determination. We also provide you with these maps. You can, hopefully you've clicked on that. If not, click on it. And what you're going to see is a list of common birthplaces in your tree. Now, for some people in my tree, all I have is Ireland. I don't have a specific place in Ireland. That's less helpful. But for those people where I have specific locations in my tree, like I have people here from Glastonbury and Hartford, Connecticut, it looks like they might also have people from that same place. So what I can do is that I can actually zoom in on this tree, and anywhere that there is an orange flag, that's where people in their tree were born. And anywhere there's a blue flag, that's where my ancestors were born. And anywhere there's a green flag, it means we both have ancestors born in that same place. Now, the reality is, when you zoom in on some of these very specific places, what you're going to discover is, here's Springfield, Massachusetts, for example. I have ancestors who were born there in 1640 and 1660. She has ancestors who were born there in 1667, 1671, 1700. The reality is that for some of these communities, 200 years ago, there were not that many people living there. 300 years ago, 400 years ago, there were even fewer people living there. And so the reality is that they very likely intermarried or at the very least knew each other. So pay attention to those green flags, specifically where you have an exact location match. As I said, those are a little bit easier to connect with. And then it gives you a common starting place to start to say, hey, you know what? Okay, here we're in Wethersfield, Connecticut. And I have in my tree an Ebenezer Keaney who was born in 1672. And she has in her tree, let's get back down here to Wethersfield. There we go. And she has in her tree a Richard Keaney born in 1674. We both have somebody with the same surname, born in the same place in about the same time. Maybe that bears looking at. Maybe that's where I should focus my attention to see if we're actually connected. Now, in this case, Keaney was also one of those matched surnames, and so I can look at this and figure that out, right? So here I have a Richard Keaney born in 1674 in Wethersfield, Connecticut, or she does, and I have an Ebenezer Keaney born in 1672 in Wethersfield, Connecticut. What are the odds that these two men are brothers or first cousins? That's certainly an area of the tree where I want to look at. And so I did. If I come in here, I can actually view her full tree. So I can view it this way, but we only go up to the 7th generation. And so you'll notice as you scroll down here, you might not see what you're looking for on the tree, especially if it's back another generation or two. But I can come here and I can view her pedigree chart. And the first thing I want to do whenever I view anybody's pedigree chart is make sure, because it always takes you to the home person on the tree, I want to make sure that I'm looking at the person who took the DNA test. So compare that screen with this screen. So here is this C.J. Chauncey person who took the test. If I scroll up a little bit, I can see her grandfather's name is Edwin Chauncey. And so I can look here and see, yep, even though it's private and her father's still living, here's her grandfather. So I'm looking at the correct person on the tree. Okay, just keep that in mind. The home person on the tree is not always the same person that took the DNA test. So when you're going to go view their tree, make sure that you find that person so that you're looking at the right information. Now, as I start looking at this tree, I can look down. What I do is I just quickly skim down these surnames and see if any of them look familiar. In this case, none of them do. Then I just open up these additional generations one at a time, and usually I'll just jump right to this oldest generation and skim down these surnames, and I'll repeat that process through each of these until I come across something that looks familiar. So in this case, as I did that, here is this Keaney surname that comes up. So I'm going to extend this generation one more time, and it looks like her oldest known relative on this line is Richard Keaney. And Richard Keaney was born in 1674, as I said, in Wethersfield, Connecticut. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to go to my family tree, and I find it easier to do this in Family Tree Maker. It's just a lot faster than waiting for screens to load. And I'm going to look up my oldest Keaney relative. In this case, it's a man named Alexander Keaney, who was born in 1625 in England. And would you look at that? He has two sons, one who is my ancestor, and I know that because it has a little orange arrow, and his name is Ebenezer Keaney, and one who is Richard Keaney, who was born in 1674 and is married to a Mary Miles. If you toggle back to her tree, you can see Richard Keaney and Mary Miles. So even though we don't have a common ancestor in our tree, because her tree doesn't go back one more generation, with just looking at those common surnames and those common birthplaces, I was fairly quickly able to discover exactly who our common ancestor is. Now, she doesn't know this, right? And so, of course, I'm going to want to send her a message and let her know that I've figured it out. So I would go ahead and say, your Richard Keaney is the younger brother of my 8th great-grandfather, Ebenezer Keaney. And if we have a common 8th great-grandfather, that means that we are 9th cousins, and isn't that exciting? And then maybe I can share that information about Ebenezer with her. Now, sometimes it's going to go the other way. In this case, I have information to share with her. There have been cases where I have found other people who have information that they can share with me. Now, let me show you one other thing that I do here. And again, this is just a system that works for me. You do what works for you. I'm going to go ahead and make a note here that we are related on the Keaney line, as she's actually an 8th cousin, one time removed, to my father. She's my 9th cousin, but she's an 8th cousin, one time removed to my father. And just save that note. Okay, I just made a note to myself so that as I skim through my results at a later date, I know what that's all about. But let me show you what I've done in Family Tree Maker that has kind of changed my life since I figured out how to do this, right? So in Family Tree Maker, one of the things that you can do is you can create a fact for just about anything. You can come in here and you can say, I want to create a fact for whatever. So what I have done is I have created a fact for DNA connection. Now there's already a fact in there for some DNA information, but particularly I wanted to make a fact for DNA connections. You'll notice I also have a fact here for their Ancestry.com tree. So one of the things that I did was I actually went ahead and entered the information all the way down this person's tree, so until we get to her. So here is the person who is my DNA connection, who came up on my match list. And what I've done here in this DNA field is I have actually copied and pasted the URL for her, for the match. So I just copied this. You can just right click and copy, or Control C, either one. And then I come over here and I paste that URL into her profile in my Family Tree Maker program. What that does is it allows me to find her again quickly if I come across her in my research. I've done the same thing and I do this with everybody, not just with my DNA matches. I've done the same thing with her tree, and here's why. She is actually not just the DNA match, but she is the owner of the tree. And so this is her tree. She's the one who owns the Ancestry account. She's the one who's doing the research. And so again, I just copied the URL here of her tree, and I pasted that right here into her profile in my Family Tree Maker so I can find it quickly. Now, one of the other things that I've done, each time I find a DNA match, and discover who the common ancestor is, I come into this common ancestor or ancestors, usually it's a couple, right? And under this DNA field, I put the words common ancestor so that I know that I have made a DNA connection to this particular ancestor through another one of their descendants. And here's one of the last things that I want to share with you is the power of Family Tree Maker. I love it. I love database software and how manipulatable and how flexible it is. I can actually come in here to this filter on my index and I can say filter in anybody where that DNA connection field contains the word common. And I'm going to go ahead and click OK, and it's going to take a minute because my database is a little bit ginormous, but it's going to show me that I have 22 common ancestors. And when I click OK, now those 22 people show up here. I could further filter that. I could filter out anybody where the gender is female, because all of these people are in couples, right? If I wanted a more manageable list, and now I've just got the 11 males who are a common ancestor, and as I click on each of them, I can then see which of my family lines I have had further evidence for based simply on these DNA matches. Now you'll notice for some of them, I have a lot of children that I've identified. But for some of them, like this Keaney fellow, I only have 1 or 2 children identified. And so as more DNA matches come in, I would imagine that Ebenezer and Richard probably had a younger sibling or 2 or 5. Their mother didn't die until, their father died in 1680. So there's another 6 years of childbearing that could have happened in this family. Of course, their mother was born in 1632. The couple was married in 1660, so she would have been in her 40s, so maybe there's another older child or 2. I can look at that and hopefully there's another DNA match that comes along that says, you know what, my ancestor was also born in the 1660s in Wethersfield, Connecticut, and their last name is Keaney, and I don't know who their parents are. And I can say, well, maybe it's this couple, right? Because I have this really clear list now of the different ancestors that have been proven out. So that's just some of the ways in which I'm using both my DNA matches and my Family Tree Maker program to just make this a really robust experience for myself. There's still lots to do, and some of these matches, let me tell you, I look at them and I have no clue. But let me just, I'm going to share with you 2 more quick things. I know we're way over time, but there's just so much to cover here. One of the things that I would recommend is that as you're looking at this list of people, don't discount people who have very, very small trees. And here's why. If I go down this list, let's see if he's still on the first page. He might not be. Oh, you know what? I know where he is. I starred him. There is a gentleman who has a tree that I think only has 6 people in it. Yeah, right here. His tree only has 6 people in it. But when I went and looked at it, none of the names looked familiar, but his name was vaguely familiar. And so I pulled up my Family Tree Maker program, and sure enough, he was in my family tree. And that's because I had done some research, some descendancy research on one of my 3rd great-grandfathers to discover, and I had discovered his mom and his grandfather had listed all the grandchildren in the obituary, and so I had him actually in my tree. So even though I've never met him, actually I have met him now, he came to a conference in Oklahoma, but now I have this connection because I had done some descendancy research. So don't discount people with small trees. Also, as you're looking down your list of people to look at, don't discount people who it says they have no family tree. I don't know if this is going to be a good example or not, but let me just take a look here. Here's a perfect example. It says they have no family tree. But when I actually click through to the match, what you're going to discover is not that they don't have a family tree, but that they have not yet linked their results to their tree. And so I can actually come here and I can say, you know what, she has 2 trees. And that's probably why she hasn't linked her results. My guess is this tree is her father's family history, and this tree is her mother's family history. And she's the one who took the test. And the problem with that is you can only link your results to one tree at a time. So one of the things that I always encourage people to do is just have one tree. The beauty of the software and the beauty of the online program, one of them is that it can handle that kind of data. So if you combine these two trees, you can then link your results to one tree and people can see. So if I would contact her and maybe encourage her to do that or suggest some ways that she could do that so that we can investigate how we're connected. If not, I can still view her family tree. I can still look at results based on her father's side of the family and her mother's side of the family and try to figure out how and if how we're connected, if we can figure it out. So just because somebody says they don't have a tree, it just means they don't have a tree attached to their DNA results. Doesn't mean that there's no tree in existence. Just because somebody has a small tree doesn't mean that you can't figure it out. And just because somebody has a locked tree doesn't mean they're not going to be willing to share. All really important points that I hope that you will remember. So we've talked about shaky leaf hints. We've talked about surname matches. We've talked about location matches. We've talked about some ways that I use stars and notes. And even some ways that I use my family tree maker system to give me a little bit more flexibility and a little bit more ability and opportunity to manipulate some of that data and to pull some of that information out. And then, of course, we've talked about the messaging system. Use it, communicate with each other. We're all in this together. And the more that I dig into DNA, the more that I discover that yes, we're all related, but we're all related in different ways. And for me, the excitement and the mystery and the challenge and the puzzle of it all is figuring out exactly how we're related. That is, believe me, all we have time for today. We have run so far over time, but hopefully this has been useful for you. I am sure you have a million questions. We want to hear those questions. If you are watching this live, I will be on chat in just a few minutes to help answer some of those questions. If you are watching an archived version of this, you have several options. You can leave a comment here on the YouTube channel. We do review those and we'll answer those questions as we need to. You can email at ask@ancestry.com. I probably won't respond to those individually because we get a lot of traffic on that email box. But if I start to see similar questions over and over and over again, it may help me prepare a future presentation. One of your best bets would probably be to go either to our help and into our community, our new community forum, and ask some of those questions there. We monitor those. We have moderators on staff here that moderate that answer some of those questions. And then we also have community members who have a lot more experience and some combined knowledge that answer those questions. Or post a question on our Facebook page. Any one of those options. We want you to be successful with this Ancestry DNA program. Like I said, I'm so excited about it. It's been thrilling for me to meet new cousins, to make those connections. I've extended my family tree 2 and 3 and 4 generations in some cases because I've made some of those connections. So it's really fantastic experience. Hopefully this has been useful for you. Until next time, this is Crista Cowan. Have fun climbing your family tree.